to the extent that much of what's in here is evidence that already has come out at the trial, it seems to me disclosure of that background information to the state doesn't create any kind of error or prejudice to Mr. McEnroe that I can think of.
Well, as Mr. O'Toole described his skillful cross-examination, I think what our concern is this. We do not want to give up any of Mr. McEnroe's legal rights. And if there is something in there, and I'm not saying there is and I'm not saying there isn't, that can be used by Mr. O'Toole to skillfully cross-examine Sally Johnson, we do not want to give anything up that Mr. McEnroe does not have, has the right to. So,
yeah, I understand, and I can appreciate where you're coming from, Mr. Ramadi. And again, I'm just trying to make sure that I don't create an error that 10 years down the road is going to be a bigger deal than it appeared at the time at 9 o'clock in the morning when I've seen it at 8:15. So, here's where I'm at. Mr. Ramadi, quite frankly, the factual information that's contained in here, to the extent that I've looked at it, the vast majority of it already seems to be part of this trial. And I'm having a hard time conceiving of how it would be work product or anything else at this juncture. Be that as it may, you all were at these meetings, I wasn't. So I'm not really sure whether there's something lurking in these notes that means more than it appears to on its face. So what I would appreciate you doing, and Mr. Prestia as well, if there's a specific item in these notes that you think really is a bigger deal than the rest of it, if you could highlight that for me, after the noon hour, I would appreciate it. Certainly. Because otherwise I'm going to probably get lost in the verbiage here that is a little moment. So
could we give that to you at the end of the day, because I don't know how much time we'll have.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Certainly.
Because most of this is largely unintelligible or, quite frankly, old news.
Okay.
But I want to give you the opportunity to tell me if there's something that I'm not seeing that's of more import than I realize.
Certainly.
Okay?
Certainly.
So that'd be great. Thank you very much. So with that out of the way, at least for the moment, are we ready to pick up where we left off yesterday?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so Ken, if you'd invite the jury and Mr. McEnroe, I can invite you back to the stand, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. McEnroe.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
I'm okay. I hope you are as well.
Can I have you speak up just a bit? It's very hard to hear you.
I understand. I'm trying to... Okay, how about that?
It's a little bit better.
Okay.
Mr. McEnroe, I only have just a few more, not a few more, but a little bit more questions. We should be done in the next, hopefully, 45 minutes or so.
Thank you.
All right?
Yes.
Well, I think when we finished yesterday on cross-examination, we were talking about your frustration with Wayne Anderson and a sense of entitlement with respect to the claimed debt between Scott Anderson and Michelle. Do you recall that?
I recall that I had mentioned that I had noted that I was frustrated with it, and that Michelle felt that she was entitled to the money from the debt, and that if he had wanted to, and that we had felt that the best way to resolve that would have been if he were to take that on himself. Now,
go ahead.
Whether or not that was something he was really, that was really his purview, I didn't agree with, but she certainly felt that, and I accepted that and came to follow her lead on that as well.
And I think you confirmed for us right at the end of the day yesterday that you told Dr. Sally Johnson, quote, if Wayne just wants people to get along, why didn't he take the debt on himself, unquote.
Yes, I did.
And that whole issue was a matter of frustration for you.
For both of us, actually, but yes.
Now, you were aware, were you not, that Wayne Anderson had some means, had some money, did he not?
I'm aware of this, yes.
And you've told others that you were aware that that his home and that property, that acreage in Carnation, was substantial.
Yes, sir, I was.
You were aware that he had savings?
Yes, sir, I was.
You were aware that he had a pension from Boeing?
I was not aware of that, no.
You were aware that he had considerable assets in terms of land and money and savings?
Yes, sir, I was.
And I believe that you told Detective Pavlovich that you were aware that Wayne had recently come into even more money. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And that was an inheritance from his mother.
Yes.
And her name was, if I remember correctly, it was Elsie.
Yes, this is correct.
And you were here when Ken Anderson talked about that in court 2 weeks ago or so.
Yes, sir.
In fact, you even told Detective Pavlovich about it in your interview on December 26, 2007.
Yes. I told him that because I was trying to mislead him.
Because
I was trying to mislead him. So.
You told him that because you were trying to mislead him.
Yes.
Okay. You're trying to lie to him.
Yes, so this is, I mentioned that within the first half an hour of our recorded conversation, in the context of why would he have because why would he have problems? Detective Pavlovich had asked of who did he have problems with, and one of the people that he had currently had problems with at that time was, to the best of my knowledge, his brother Ken over this inheritance.
And in fact, when he asked you about was there anybody who Wayne Anderson had recently had problems with, the first person you mentioned, remember, was Buck I.
Yes.
And that's the person who you told Detective Pavlovich was a real psycho.
He had recently had problems with him. However, again, I shouldn't even have mentioned him because it did, as you said previously, I knew perfectly well it didn't involve him. I should not have mentioned any of these people, and I was wrong to do so.
And then is it not true that without Detective Pavlovich even asking you another question, you pretended to wonder out loud, quote, who else didn't like him?
I was not pretending, actually.
Well, you were trying to deceive and mislead Detective Pavlovich.
I was trying to deceive and mislead him, yes.
And you made the statement, who else didn't like him, referring to Wayne Anderson. Recall
yes,
that?
I do.
And that's and it's at that point that you volunteered
Yes.
Ken Anderson.
Yes, sir.
And you said, quote, him and his brother, like I said, his mother just died, and there was a huge inheritance, okay? Recall saying that?
Yes, sir, I do.
And then, subsequent to that, you said, quote, there was this really big inheritance. It was actually split up between them. Recall that?
Yes, I do.
You even knew the amount, didn't you?
I knew what I had been told, yes.
Detective Pavlovich asked, how much money were Wayne and his brother supposed to get? Do you know? And your answer was, quote, like in the area of $500,000, unquote.
Yes, sir, I said that.
So you were well aware that Wayne Anderson, in addition to having property
Yes.
and money, had come into an inheritance in which he was at a minimum going to split what you were led to believe was $500,000.
Yes, sir.
You also talked about Wayne Anderson's inheritance with others, haven't you?
I don't recall speaking of it with others, but I don't doubt that I have.
You recall talking about it with Dr. Sally Johnson.
I don't recall speaking of it with Dr. Sally Johnson, but I'm sure I did.
Let me have you think back to June 14th, 2011, about 3.5 years after you were in custody. You recall
Okay.
talking to Sally Johnson in June of 2014?
Not specifically.
You recall talking to Sally Johnson at all?
I recall speaking to her. I just can't say specifically what happened on that particular day.
Okay. Well,
I don't recall the specifics of that conversation. That's all.
And you recall telling Dr. Johnson, whatever the day was, you recall telling
Yes.
Dr. Johnson that Michelle would inherit Wayne's assets.
That was her assumption, yes.
You recall telling Dr. Johnson in November of 2014, 4 months ago,
Yes.
as we were picking this jury, that you were aware that Wayne had a $500,000 in liquid assets.
I don't believe I used the term liquid, but yes.
And that was the money that you were referring to from his mother, Elsie.
Yes.
You recall telling Dr. Johnson at one point in your conversations with her that Wayne's assets were worth more than $1 million.
I don't recall saying that, but it's very probably true.
You recall telling her that that $1 million did not include the property on which the homes rested in Carnation.
No, I don't recall saying that, but again, I don't doubt your reference.
Are you saying you didn't say it, or you don't recall saying it?
I'm just saying I don't recall saying it, and that I do not doubt your reference, so
In any event, that statement is true, is it not?
I'm sure it is.
You
Was.
recall telling Dr. Johnson that Michelle Anderson would get the inheritance, which would be the land and the money, and that you guys planned to sell the land.
Yes.
You recall telling Dr. Johnson that the plan was to do all this and everybody would disappear.
That was the plan that she had put forth, yes.
You recall telling Dr. Johnson that you would have all this money and live happily ever after.
This is what she was putting forth, yes.
Mr. McEnroe, this crime was all about money, was it not? It was not about some claim of abuse.
No, so not for me. For I felt that we did not have any right or claim to his money, or nor his life, nor his land. She, on the other hand, did feel that she had a right to some. She felt that she had a right to the property and for some of his money, but all the same, I was very much against the concept of holding anybody for those things. She was very much, okay, this needs to happen and I can't let them take away what they owe me, what I'm entitled to.
Do you recall telling Dr. Johnson the plan was to do all this and everybody would disappear, you'd have all this money and live happily ever after?
As I said just a moment ago, yes.
You and Michelle Anderson went to Wayne and Judy's home with the intent of killing everybody, didn't you?
Yes, so I
Yep.
was hoping that things would go differently and that, I don't know, when she confronted Scott, that he'd give her the money and we would just leave. But I thought we were in danger.
And if Mary Victoria Anderson had been there with her children, she would be dead and her children would be dead too, wouldn't they?
I do not know the answer to that question. Very probably, but I do not know.
And the
I would
only,
not have wanted to. I would not have wanted to, but I didn't want to kill any of them.
and the only person left in the family to inherit would be Michelle Anderson, your girlfriend.
This is exactly the plan that she was putting out there. Yes.
You testified, I think it was last week, I think last Thursday, that you have tried to plead guilty in this case
Yes, sir, I have.
to aggravated murder in the first degree.
Yes, sir, I have.
And you've said that you've tried to plead guilty a number of times.
Yes, sir, I have.
By the way, your offer was to plead guilty to aggravated murder in the first degree, correct?
My offer was to plead guilty to life sentence, yes.
And you are aware of the elements of the crime of murder in the first degree, are you not?
I believe so, yes.
And those elements are that on December 24th, 2007, you caused the death of each of your victims, right?
Yes, sir.
The second element is that you acted with intent and premeditation.
Yes, sir.
The third is that the victims died as a result of your acts.
Yes, sir.
And the fourth is that it's occurred in the state of Washington.
Yes, sir.
And you're telling the jury that you all along have been willing to plead guilty to premeditated murder.
Yes, sir.
Objection. To the extent this reflects on Mr. McEnroe's exercise of his right to trial.
Overrule the objection. Go ahead.
Yes, sir.
And you are aware that the prosecutor's office, the elected prosecutor, has declined your offers to plead guilty.
I'm aware of this, yes.
And you're aware that the prosecutor's office has maintained the position that it is a jury drawn from the community who should decide what the proper punishment is here.
Yes,
Are you
sir.
not?
I'm aware of this.
And you disagree with that, you prefer to plead guilty.
I had wanted, as I said previously, to spare everybody the trouble and expense and pain of going through this, yes.
You're aware that there are only two possible punishments for aggravated murder in the first degree.
Yes, sir, I am.
One of those punishments is life without the possibility of parole or release,
Yes, sir, I am.
and the other is the death penalty.
Yes, sir.
And you made your offers in order that you would get the most lenient sentence possible.
I made my offers in order that the trial could be avoided, and so that we could all just, so that all the people that I had hurt and everybody else could just get on with their lives. Because one cannot just simply plead out to death. You still have to go through the entire trial anyway. All of the stuff that would have come up in the first part of the trial still has to come up in the second part of the trial. So,
Your offers to plead guilty were to avoid having a jury make the decision with respect to the proper punishment, correct?
Objection. The same objection as before, Your Honor.
Sustain the objection to that last question, Mr. Crystal. Maybe you can rephrase it.
Your offer to plead guilty was a calculated, strategic decision that you made.
The same objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. Go ahead and answer, sir.
my offer to plead guilty was an attempt to avoid this trial. I really did not want to have to go through this trial. This was a horrific event, and I didn't feel that anybody needed nor wanted to have to go through this thing. I certainly didn't. It has been awful for me, and I can only imagine how much more awful it's been for the families of the victims and the jury and everybody else involved in this to have to go through this thing. I tried to save them that.
Pardon me?
I tried to avoid that.
Mr. McEnroe, the bottom line is your offer to plead guilty was to avoid the possibility of a death sentence.
Same objection.
Overruled. Let me answer, sir.
My offer was to avoid the possibility, was to avoid the was to avoid the pain and suffering that a trial would bring.
Are you saying to this jury your offer is not based on a desire to avoid the death penalty?
Not necessarily, no. It was about trying to avoid having to go through this trial. That was the entire point of it. I didn't want anybody to have to go through this. As I've said previously, nobody should have to go through this.
Your Honor, this opens up a line of questions that I think I need to address to the court before I ask them in front of the jury.
All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to excuse you to jury room for a couple of minutes. Please leave your notepads and pens on the chairs and don't discuss the case in the court itself during the break, and I'll be back here shortly. Thank you very much.
That he could have pleaded guilty to aggravated murder, and he could have accepted the death penalty as a punishment. Because his answer has been his sole motivation is to avoid putting everybody through this trial. He could have done that by pleading guilty as charged with the death penalty on the table.
I don't believe he said that was his sole motive.
Well, I'm trying to walk this fine line, so
I understand.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
No, go ahead.
Just so I understand that, I want to make sure I understand the exact question Mr. O'Toole wishes to to ask. Are you aware you could have pled guilty to the death penalty?
You could have pled guilty completely as charged to aggravated murder with the death penalty.
This sounds remarkably like an argument I heard a year or so ago about what exactly is the death penalty vis-a-vis the charging decision, and whether or not it's an aggravator, whether or not it's a new crime with additional elements. Seems to be wandering backwards into that whole area, at least on the face of it.
To be honest, here's the record in this case is that there's never been an offer to plead guilty unless the death penalty is taken off the table. And it sounds like that's what that Mr. McEnroe is taking a position contrary to that. And I want to make certain I can go down this path. My concern was if I had asked one or two preparatory questions, we would have been down this path in a way that would have put it in front of the jury prematurely.
I understand, and I'm trying to figure out how to split this hair.
We object,
Garcia?
Your Honor, yes, thank you. We object to the line of questioning. We believe it is exactly that. It starts splitting hairs and getting into the distinction. First of all, it starts to, as I faced on my previous objections, it starts to reflect on whether there should be some detriment to Mr. McEnroe because he exercised his right to a trial. That's part of it. The other part of it is that I think it really calls for him to expound on legal issues that are very nuanced I think it essentially I think it essentially sorry, I'm having trouble articulating this one.
No, that's okay.
I may be able to, maybe I can shortcut this. John, I've got the pleading paperwork that repeatedly says that the offer to plead guilty is without the death penalty. I'll ask him that question. If that maybe that is a more accurate, a better question to ask.
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay,
is
I'll make it clear that way.
rather than backing our way into a whole bunch of questions about whether or not we have to have a mini trial before we got to the mitigation portion, because that would be required even if he pled guilty and the death penalty remained on the table. So he's partly accurate on some of these things, but they do get nuance.
That's what I was trying to say.
Hang on a second.
Sorry,
Second, please. And if Mr. McEnroe has any questions, I would ask that he have the opportunity to
And I'll
consult with
certainly
counsel.
give him that opportunity, so Mr. Presty, go ahead.
Yes, I think that as long as it is couched, as long as the question is couched in terms of your offer to plead guilty was the offer to plead guilty as charged, with the sentence being six sentences of life without release.
And I think he's essentially established that already.
Then I think that the line of questioning should go no further.
Mr. O'Toole?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, no problem. Can you tell me what was the last question you said that you would want to ask again? Maybe you can't replicate it right now.
Well, it's something to the effect of, is it not true that your attorneys have advised the prosecutor's office that your offer to plead guilty is conditional upon the death penalty being taken off the table, or something like that?
Okay. Do you have any quarrel with that, Mr. Presty or Mr. Lodge?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, I think that's appropriate as well, and I think it clears up the issue to everyone's satisfaction without taking us too far down or into that rabbit hole that we've discussed previously. So, okay, let's do that.
And I apologize for the...
That's okay. I'd rather do this now rather than try to untangle it later. So, Kenny, I think we're ready to bring it to
Just so we're clear, I'm not trying to tell Mr. McEnroe what his answer should be, but I don't know. It's a bit awkward to say we need to consult with the client when there's a pending question, but I wasn't sure if he had something.
In all fairness, I would not object if Mr. Presty and Mr. Lodge can speak to Mr. McEnroe on that issue so we get this straight and as narrowly confined as possible. I don't have any objection.
Okay. So, Mr. McEnroe, why don't you sit down and chat with your counsel for a moment, and then we'll get started.
Thank you, Your Honor.
No problem. Mr. McEnroe, we can invite you back up here.
Thank you, sir.
So are we ready? Okay, then let's bring in the opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. My apologies again.
No problem,
Please rise for the jury.
And welcome back. Please be seated. I apologize for the interruption. Go ahead.
As do I, Your Honor. I apologize. Mr. McEnroe, we were finishing up some questioning regarding your efforts, your offers to plead guilty.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. McEnroe, it is true, is it not, that your offer to plead guilty was conditioned solely on the agreement of the King County Prosecutor's Office not to seek the death penalty against you?
Yes, sir.
And you were aware that the Prosecutor's Office has maintained throughout all this time that that is a decision with respect to punishment that a jury should make?
Yes, sir.
Mr. McEnroe, is it fair to say that you do believe that you could kill again?
No, sir.
You've talked with others about the possibility of violence in the future, have you not?
I have.
And about your attitudes regarding violence?
Yes, sir, I have.
And one of those persons that you've talked to is Dr. Sally Johnson.
Yes, sir.
And she's a, I think, an expert in what's called future dangerousness.
Yes.
And she's spoken to you as long ago as June 2011
Yes.
and as recently as November of 2014
Yes.
and some other dates in between.
Yes.
And you've talked with Dr. Johnson, have you not, about whether you pose a risk of danger to others in the future?
Yes, sir.
And that's a concern for you, is it not?
The only thing that is a concern is that I might find myself in a position like I was drawn into in this, and so I've done a lot to try to change both my just the way I handle things and the ways I would react to them. I don't allow myself to be so influenced by the emotions or decisions of others as I had been, and as in this particular case. And even so, I have a greater awareness of just how bad things can get, and so that by itself gives very strong brakes against any violence of any kind, even against being angry. I very rarely even get upset anymore. I really try very hard to not even let myself get upset. I've made a lot of effort into even abolishing that from my life as it is.
Mr. McEnroe, did you not tell Dr. Johnson that one of the reasons you're concerned about the potential for future violence is that violence had been such a part of your life with Michelle Anderson?
Which is one of those things that I have really had to, as I said, I was having been a major element in such a horrible thing as this. I've had to sit here and really go over how did I fail so utterly, so horribly, and figure out how I can prevent it in future situations. One of the things that had allowed me to get drawn into such a mindset was the pervasive focus on violence that she had in that being with all that I showed.
And you shared that focus on violence with her?
Yes, as I just said.
And you actually told Dr. Johnson, did you not, quote, I can't say I never will kill again because I never thought I'd do that, unquote?
Yes, I did say that. The reason I said that is very much the same reason that I said that the other day when we were speaking about possibilities. I find it very hard to say in absolute certainties, especially when something happened that I'm a very peaceful person. I don't like the concept of causing other people pain or any kind of even problems, and yet I let myself get drawn into this against who I am and who I was and my own moral code. Yes.
But those are your words, quote, I can't just say I will never kill again, unquote.
Yes, sir. I can't just say I wouldn't because I have taken as strong of measures against it as I know how, and I will continue to do so because I cannot allow something like this to happen again. I can't.
Is it true that you repeated that concern to Dr. Johnson in November of 2014, 4 months or so ago?
As I said, I never forget about what had happened, so it's always there. It's always, how did I let this happen? And what can I do to make sure that this doesn't happen? It's something where I'm always proactively trying to do everything I can to make sure that I don't allow myself to get upset, don't allow myself to get angry towards people. I don't argue with people, I don't fight with people, and these are all steps taken towards keeping myself from doing any damage towards others, if at all possible.
But you told Dr. Johnson in November of 2014 that you feared that you might be, quote, forced into that situation in jail where you might actually have to kill again.
There is the concern that, say, if somebody was attacking somebody else who I knew to be in a situation where they had, for example, if there were two people fighting, this is one thing, but if somebody was attacking and hurting somebody else, say one of the guards or a nurse or whatever, nurse or whatever, and the only way to resolve that, I would try everything else first, but if the only way to resolve that was to actually hurt or kill that person who was attacking, then I might find it necessary to do so. This is not something that I would want to do. This is not something that I believe any normal person would go and find themselves acting differently in that situation. I actually would say that I'm less likely to hurt or kill anybody else again than any normal person, just because I know the consequences of what it's like. I'm not talking about jail. I'm talking about the moral and I'm not talking about jail. I'm talking about the moral and spiritual consequences and just how awful it really is.
But as you expressed to Dr. Johnson, that possibility does remain.
That possibility remains with every single person. I would say that possibility remains with me less than anybody else in this room.
You've testified about how you feel about what happened in this case. Do you recall that?
I do recall this, yes.
And your claim of remorse for your victims?
Absolute, yes.
It is true, though, that you have convinced yourself, you've come to terms with what you did to these 6 innocent victims.
One can never come completely to terms with it. I've come to a level of being able to live with it. But one can never come completely to terms with that. That's why I have this huge debt of what I need to do to try and make some penance for what I've done, to try and offset the damage that I've done, not only I don't only owe that to the victims, but to everybody, to try and do something to offset some of the awfulness that I've wrought upon the world by my willful ignorance and failure.
But you've told a number of people, have you not, that you somewhat absolved yourself of what you did?
No, sir.
You recall talking to Dr. Dutton on September 26, 2014, about 6 or 7 months ago?
I do.
You recall that was after this trial had started, wasn't it?
I believe so.
You talked to Dr. Dutton about a number of things during that meeting on September 26th. You gave him some updated information regarding Crow and your spirit guides. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir.
You also talked to him with respect to conversations you claim you've had with the victims in this case.
Yes, sir.
And you told Dr. Dutton, did you not, last September 26th, I have spoken with the Andersons after they died,
Yes.
that sometimes they come to me.
Yes.
You said, I don't seek them out.
Yes.
And you said, quote, they're not really as upset as one would expect, unquote.
Yes.
That is the way you believe, isn't it?
As I've said, no. It's something where you would expect them to be very angry, but they were decent people in life, and they remain decent people now. That does not absolve me in any way, shape, or form. It still leaves me with this burden of I have to go and do everything I can to offset, to do something to offset some of this terribleness that I have wrought, and that they agree with that.
The Andersons agree with
That I should be going and trying to do something to make some effort towards something constructive.
You told Dr. Dutton, quote, they're not as upset as you would expect, unquote.
As I just explained, one would be expecting, bless you, to be very upset about being killed in this, but they were decent people and understanding people and good people, and they did not, as I've said time and time again, deserve this horrible end. And like I said, that does not absolve me of anything.
So in your mind, you've convinced yourself that Judy Anderson is not as upset as you might expect for the murder of her 2 grandchildren.
This is what I've been told. This
is what you claim you've been told by them.
Yes, sir. And I'm not saying that she's happy about it. Obviously she's not. But she's not full of... She wasn't somebody who was full of hatred and anger in life, and she's not now. And
Go ahead.
she knows that I'm trying to go and make some amends, though her and I and everybody else know that there's no way that I could possibly make enough amends to offset at all what I've done. But I very much have to try to do that. It's very important that I try to do that.
You've also expressed these same views to Dr. Sally Johnson, have you not?
Yes, sir, I believe I have.
You've told Dr. Johnson again that you've talked to the Andersons.
Yes.
And you told her that they, quote, they've gone on to better things, unquote.
Yes.
So, Mr. McEnroe, it's your belief that you sent the Andersons, those 6 victims, on to better things?
No, so what I mean by moving on to better things is from being in, I absolutely do not mean by killing them. I mean by them being in a state of whatever to moving on to, from being in a state of, I don't know, non-corporeal life to corporeal life to something else. I don't know, but I certainly don't mean, I absolutely do not mean that killing them was putting them into a better position by any means at all.
Or that you're not absolved?
Absolutely not, no. I am not, as I said, I'm not trying to absolve myself here. I'm not trying to give any excuses or say that anything that I did was okay, because it wasn't. I just want to explain why what happened, and that's one of the things that I owe them, and I owe all of you, and I owe everybody, and that's just the first step in trying to make some kind of amends, no matter how paltry they are, compared to the awfulness of what I have done.
Well, Mr. McEnroe, if you're not absolved, why did you tell Dr. Sally Johnson about your victims? Quote, they're okay, they don't blame me, unquote.
Even though they don't hate me for that, or hold specifically that it was that it would have happened in that way but for me, and they said they don't blame me. I tried to apologize to them. It's like, look, I'm so sorry for what happened. I didn't want this to happen, and they told me that they didn't blame me and that it was okay, and just do what I'm trying to do to make things better. And I mean, I can't make things all the way better, obviously. I mean, nobody can, right? But I'm trying to do something to offset this awfulness, and they agreed with that. Now, that doesn't absolve me by any means at all.
But in your mind, they don't blame you.
I blame myself.
Mr. McEnroe, on December 24th, 2007, you went up the hill with Michelle Anderson to kill everybody inside that house, didn't you? It's a new subject. Mr. McEnroe, you've told us you went up to the hill with Michelle Anderson, did you not?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is the twitch back, Mr. McEnroe?
It's been going this entire time.
I didn't hear you.
It's been going this entire time.
And if Mary Victoria had been there, she would be dead too.
I do not know. I would hope not, but it would not have been. It certainly would not have been my choice to have done so. I was not under any belief that she would be there.
Mr. McEnroe, here was the plan that you and Michelle Anderson agreed on. You would go up the hill and kill everybody inside, correct?
Yes. Well, no. We would go up there. She would kill everybody, and I would make sure that she was safe. And then I would help her clear things up.
And this plan that you guys agreed on was based on money, greed, wasn't it?
Perhaps on one point, I was trying to protect her. I thought that this was... I really believed when she said that we were in danger and this was preemptive. I was trying to protect home. I did not want their money. I had no greed for their money. I did not want their land. I had no greed for their land. I did not particularly like their land. It was out in the middle of nowhere. I would have much rather moved back to the city. She wanted to have a whole buffer zone, and she felt that she was entitled to that property and that money, but I did not want any of it. It was not mine in any way, shape, or form. I had no right to it whatsoever.
This is a plan that you guys have been talking about for almost a year, wasn't it?
That she had been talking about for almost a year, and I had been trying to talk her out for almost a year, yes.
And it was a plan that came to fruition about a month before when you got fired from your, when you lost that position or didn't get considered for that position at Target, correct?
When I was passed over for that promotion, yes.
It was a plan at a time when Michelle Anderson was no longer working, correct?
It was a plan that the reason she was no longer working is because I had literally begged her to stop working because she was going and coming back from work so angry that I was worried that she would hurt somebody. So I asked her to let me go back to work. So I did.
And in mid-November of 2007, you were no longer working.
Unfortunately, yes. No, it was not mid-November. It was near the end of November.
Sometime in November, you stopped working.
Yes, sir. For some time, and then she told me that this, because I had not gotten that thing, that I had to go and quit. So because I had not gotten that thing, that they were disrespecting me and not taking me seriously, and so I had to quit, and I had to be there to help her with this.
You told us yesterday that when you didn't get the position, you were indignant, you were pissed off. Do you recall that?
As I said, I took her indignity and her anger, yes.
This was a plan you guys contemplated happening on Christmas Eve when everybody would be present, correct?
Unfortunately, yes.
And it was a plan that you were well aware of because the day before, when Michelle Anderson was shopping with her mother,
Yes.
you knew the reason she didn't buy any presents because everybody in that house was going to be dead, right?
Yes, sir.
And it was a plan for the day before. You told her not to harm that woman who ran her off the road because you didn't want to, in your words, she didn't want to fuck up things for tomorrow, correct?
Objection, asked and answered.
This is part of Mr. McEnroe, this is a plan that after you waited for the holidays and you went up there and killed everybody, you left the property armed with an alibi created by you, correct?
The alibi came a bit later.
Objection, asked.
I'm asking about the plan now, Your Honor.
Go ahead and answer.
The alibi came a bit later, but yes.
And that plan devised by you,
No.
Mr. McEnroe, you stated repeatedly yesterday, you're the person who came up with the plan of what to tell the police. Are you changing that now?
No, so all I'm saying is the alibi is what I came up with. I did not come up with the plan to kill all these people. No, I did not do that.
And Mr. McEnroe, your plan was to cover this up, wasn't it?
Yes, sir, it was.
Your plan was to drive away for a couple of days and eventually return back to that property, was it not?
Yes, sir, it was.
And as you told us, your plan was to go back up to that house, to go inside, and to discover all those bodies, correct?
Yes, sir, it was.
Your plan was, when you reported those murders, to tell everybody you and Michelle Anderson were off on your way to Las Vegas to get married.
Yes, sir.
And the plan was to pretend that you were completely unaware of what was going on and what had happened inside that house.
Yes, sir.
And the plan was that you would walk inside that home and stumble onto that murder scene, 6 people dead, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the plan was that Michelle Anderson would get all that money and all that property that she would inherit, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that you would live happily ever after. That
That
was
was-
the plan, was it not?
That was the plan that she had sold me on. In all reality, if things had went in that direction, I would not have survived the week. I would have killed myself within a week.
Even though Mary Victoria Anderson was not there, she would have come into millions of dollars, correct?
Yes.
And as you told Dr. Johnson, do all this, everybody disappears, all this money, live happily ever after, correct?
That was the whole plan, yes.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Joe, do you feel badly for what you did for killing all these people?
Words cannot express how awful this is, how awful I feel, how awful my actions, all of it has become the center of my life in trying to make some payment for, not payment, but just make something, some kind of, God, can't think of the word, some kind of recompense for this, because, I mean, as I said, nothing can balance out what I did, but I owe it to them, and I owe it to everybody who knew them and everybody who knew me, and just everybody in general, to try and make to at least try to go and like set the scale a little bit closer to right.
Joe, how often do you think about killing the Andersons?
It's in my mind all the time. It's a constant, as I was trying to say, it's a constant, this is my burden. It's my constant burden that I did this thing and I have to go and make some recompense for this.
Joe, when you were talking yesterday about just before you shot Judy and she was saying, no, you shouted. Why did you shout?
There are certain things that every time I hear them, or every time I say them, it brings that flashing back. Every time I say no twice or more, it becomes that. Every time somebody says, you don't have to do this, I think about what Erica had said. That's why I can say that I'm certain that she did not say no, not the kids, because that would have stuck in my head like everything else that was said has stuck in my head.
But even if she didn't say it, she must have been thinking it, don't you think?
Absolutely.
Joe, you said a couple of days ago on the witness stand, you said, look, why don't you kill me? I don't even care. So do you care? Why don't you just accept execution?
I have to make, if I just die, then that's an act of further destructiveness is not going to is not going to do anything to ameliorate a prior act of destructiveness. You can't,
A prior act of
destructiveness, you can't go, it's the old saying, two wrongs don't make a right. This is not some 80s movie where if somebody's dead, the only thing to do is, and you've got problems, the only thing to do is go off and like kill more people. That doesn't work in real life. The only thing I have to go and try to make some kind of recompense for what I've done.
Well,
Are
you going to reform all the inmates up there at the Department of Corrections, Joe?
I don't believe I can do that. That's just not even humanly realistic. I mean, if I can go off and help even one person become a better person and maybe be a better father for his kids and a better husband to his wife, even if he never leaves and he's doing it from the distance, but that's still something. That's still some level of positive change brought in the world, and that's, you can't go and create more. You can't create positivity from more negativity. But I owe them to go and try and balance the scales at least a little bit in any way possible.
Will that make you feel better?
I can't say that it would make me feel better. It would make me feel as though I'm trying. It's the only thing that trying to do these things is the only thing that having that goal, that reason is the only reason that is the main reason that I'm still going. And also I don't want to talk
You don't want to what?
I've brought such pain and dishonor on my family and the people who you've seen and will see, and just everybody else who you haven't seen, everybody that I've known. And I don't want to go and further dishonor them. I want to be able or bring more pain on them. It's just I'm trying really hard to do what I believe is right here, and all I ask is to be allowed to do that, and that's all I'm trying to do.
I have no further questions.
Any recross?
No, you don't think.
All right, you can step down.
Thank you, sir.
May we take the morning break at this point?
I was going to suggest that, so why don't you go through your notepad and pens there on the chairs, and we'll excuse it for 30 minutes. See you back here shortly. Please don't discuss the case amongst yourselves. We're doing any research on the future.
I believe she was going to be here as of 11, but I will phone my paralegal right away and see if she might be available
All right,
a little
so-
sooner than that. And we had a third witness that we were trying to set up that as of this morning we hadn't reached that person. So it's possible that we only have 2 left for today. It's possible that we'll have 3, and I'll check on that right now. But I feel certain that we will have 1 more this morning. So.
And you don't know whether they might be available a little earlier.
I don't know. I know she was scheduled to be here no later than 11, but I'll see. She might be a little bit early. I just have to call and check into that, and I'll let Ms. Hart know about that.
Okay, so why don't we do this? We'll take a morning recess.
My paralegal was just entered the room, and I just
Oh.
question for a second.
There you go.
Okay, Ms. Merton is present, so
Okay.
so we'll. She's the only other witness we have scheduled for this morning, I believe.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and take the morning recess now?
Great.
Get it out of the way since we've already sent the jury back to the jury room.
Sure.
And then reconvene in 15 minutes.